Ever wondered what royals do for fun? The answer might make your stomach turn. Number 11. Blood sports and pheasant hunting. The British royal family has a long-standing tradition of participating in blood sports, particularly pheasant hunting. This isn't your average weekend hobby. Each year, usually after Christmas at Sandringham Estate, members of the royal family gather for a massive pheasant shoot. Thousands of birds may be killed in a single day's hunting. Even Queen Elizabeth II, known for her gentle demeanor with corgis, was an enthusiastic participant in these events, often seen picking up dead birds after shoots well into her 90s. The tradition dates back centuries when hunting was considered not just recreation but a necessary skill for royalty. King Edward VII was known to have shot over 1,000 pheasants in a single day at Sandringham in 1913. The tradition has caused considerable controversy in recent years, with Prince Harry reportedly skipping the hunt after meeting Meghan Markle, who disapproves of the practice. However, most royal family members consider this bloody tradition an essential part of their heritage. What makes this tradition particularly bizarre to outsiders is the formalities surrounding it. There are strict dress codes, specific roles for participants, and even royal gamekeepers whose job it is to raise the birds through the year specifically for these shooting events. The birds are not wasted. They're distributed to estate workers or sold to local butchers. But the scale and enthusiasm for what many consider a brutal sport remains shocking to many observers. Even young royals are introduced to the tradition early. Prince George reportedly attended his first hunt at age 5, continuing a tradition that has survived animal rights protests and changing public attitudes toward blood sports. The royal family maintains that these hunts are about conservation and rural tradition rather than bloodlust. But to outsiders, the sight of royals enthusiastically shooting hundreds of birds remains one of their most peculiar customs. Number 10. Weighing guests at Christmas. Would you step on a scale before and after Christmas dinner if the Queen demanded it? Royal guests don't have a choice. In one of the strangest royal traditions, guests arriving at Sandringham for Christmas celebrations are weighed upon arrival and again before departure. This isn't some modern health kick. It dates back to the early 1900s and King Edward VII. The monarch reportedly wanted to ensure his guests were being well fed during their stay, and gaining at least 3 pounds was considered proof of a successful Christmas feast. The weighing occurs on antique scales, with the results dutifully recorded in a special book. Imagine arriving at the royal residence, excited for Christmas festivities, only to be directed to a pair of scales before you've even taken off your coat. First-time guests are often shocked by this unusual welcome ritual. Even Princess Diana reportedly found this tradition particularly uncomfortable during her first royal Christmas. What makes this tradition especially bizarre is its persistence in modern times, when conversations about body image and weight are handled much more sensitively. Yet the royals carry on with this Edwardian custom as if it were perfectly normal to announce and record everyone's weight fluctuations over the holiday period. According to former royal chef Darren McGrady, the Christmas feast that contributes to this weight gain includes a full English breakfast, lunch, afternoon tea, dinner, and even a buffet supper before bed. If you find stepping on the scale at your doctor's office anxiety-inducing, imagine doing so in front of the royal family, knowing your weight will be recorded in a historic ledger that contains generations of Christmas weight fluctuation. It's a reminder that even the most progressive royal family members are still bound by traditions that would seem completely outlandish in any other household. Number 9. The royal touch for scrofula. Can royals actually heal the sick with their touch? For centuries, people believed exactly that. The royal touch is perhaps one of the most bizarre traditions in royal history. Dating back to medieval times, it was believed that monarchs could cure diseases, particularly scrofula, a form of tuberculosis affecting the lymph nodes, simply by touching afflicted subjects. This wasn't just a superstition, but a formal ceremony where hundreds of sick people would line up to be touched by the sovereign. The tradition began with Edward the Confessor in England and continued for centuries. By the time of Charles II in the 17th century, the ceremony had become elaborate, with the monarch touching the affected person's neck sores and hanging a gold coin around their neck. Charles II reportedly touched over 92,000 people during his reign. The custom was so established that special touching pieces medals, specifically made for these ceremonies, were minted. Queen Anne was the last British monarch to perform the ceremony regularly, though George IV discontinued it as too Catholic. However, the belief in royal healing powers persisted. When Queen Victoria visited Scotland during a cholera outbreak, locals requested to touch her hand, believing it would protect them from disease. Even into the early 20th century, some British citizens still believed in the healing power of the royal touch. What makes this tradition particularly fascinating is how it blurred the line between religion, medicine, and monarchy. The belief that royal blood contained divine healing properties reinforced the idea that monarchs ruled by divine right. Doctors of the time sometimes even referred patients to royal touching ceremonies when their own treatments failed. Though modern royals no longer claim healing powers, the tradition has evolved into charitable work focused on health causes. Queen Elizabeth II became patron of hundreds of medical charities, and when royals visit hospitals today, they still touch patients, not to heal them miraculously, but to provide comfort through human connection. The mystical belief in the royal touch may have faded, but its legacy continues in the royal family's public health engagements. Number 8. No shellfish rule. Ever wondered what foods are forbidden at royal dinners? The answer might surprise seafood lovers. The British royal family follows a strict no shellfish rule when dining, especially during official tours and public engagements. This peculiar dietary restriction isn't based on allergies or religious reasons, but on the very practical fear of food poisoning. Shellfish, with its higher risk of causing illness, represents a potential threat to the royal schedule, and nothing disrupts carefully planned royal engagements quite like an emergency bathroom situation. This tradition began generations ago, before modern food safety standards were implemented. Queen Elizabeth II was particularly strict about following this rule throughout her 70-year reign. The restriction applies to lobster, shrimp, crab, clams, mussels, and oysters, basically anything with a shell that comes from the sea. Former royal butler Grant Harold confirmed that the Queen enforced this rule to prevent food poisoning that could disrupt royal duties. What makes this tradition especially interesting is how some younger royals have begun to break it. Prince William and Kate Middleton have been spotted enjoying oysters and other shellfish at public events, suggesting a generational shift in adherence to this particular rule. However, during official overseas tours representing the monarch, the rule was still generally observed by all family members during Queen Elizabeth's reign. The royal family also traditionally avoids rare meat, tap water in foreign countries, and excessive garlic, the latter reportedly because the Queen disliked the smell during conversations. These food restrictions might seem trivial, but they reflect the extraordinary pressure on royals to remain in perfect health for their public duties. A single day of illness can mean disappointing thousands of people who have waited to see them, not to mention the security and logistical nightmare of rescheduling royal appearances. In private, when not on official duty, some royals do indulge in these forbidden foods. Prince Charles, now King Charles III, has been known to enjoy shellfish when dining privately. But the tradition remains firmly in place for public engagements, a reminder that being royal means sacrificing even simple pleasures like enjoying a plate of shrimp for the sake of duty. Number 7. The Royal Womb Watchers. How would you feel if your pregnancy was national news before you'd even told your family? For royal women, this is reality. One of the strangest aspects of royal life is the intense public scrutiny of royal women's reproductive systems. The moment a royal wedding concludes, the womb watching begins. This isn't a modern phenomenon brought on by tabloid culture. It has been happening for centuries, with the pressure to produce heirs, particularly male ones, being perhaps the most significant burden placed on royal brides. In the past, royal births weren't just public knowledge. They were public events. When royal women gave birth, the room would be crowded with witnesses to verify the legitimacy of the heir. This practice began after rumors circulated in 1688 that James II's son was not actually born to Queen Mary, but had been smuggled into the royal bedchamber in a warming pan. To prevent such rumors, future royal births were witnessed by government officials, courtiers, and sometimes even common citizens. Mary of Modena had over 40 people in her delivery room when she gave birth to James Francis Edward Stuart in 1688. Even as recently as the 1840s, when Queen Victoria gave birth, the Home Secretary was required to be present. This intrusive tradition finally ended with the birth of Princess Margaret in 1930, though the Home Secretary remained outside the room. Today's royal women don't have officials staring at them during labor, but they face modern versions of this invasion of privacy. Kate Middleton's pregnancies were announced earlier than she might have preferred due to her hospitalization for hyperemesis gravidarum. The world's media then camped outside the hospital for weeks before her due dates. Every slight change in a royal woman's appearance sparks pregnancy rumors, with body language experts analyzing everything from hand placement to clothing choices. What makes this tradition particularly bizarre is how it reduces royal women to their reproductive function. Despite their charitable work, education, and other accomplishments, royal women know that producing heirs remains one of their most scrutinized duties. Princess Diana once described the pressure as overwhelming, and the tradition continues with each new generation of royal women. Even in the 21st century, royal wombs remain subject to public fascination and speculation in a way that would be considered deeply inappropriate for any other woman. Number 6. Swan-upping and royal ownership of swans. Did you know the king legally owns all the swans in open water in England? This isn't a medieval leftover law. It's actively enforced today. Since the 12th century, the British monarch has claimed ownership of all unmarked mute swans swimming in open waters across England. This tradition began when swans were considered a delicacy served at royal feasts. Today, the king no longer eats his swans, but he still owns them, at least technically. The tradition is maintained through an annual ceremony called swan-upping, perhaps one of the most visually bizarre royal customs still practiced. Each July, a flotilla of wooden skiffs rows up the River Thames from London to Oxfordshire over 5 days. The Queen's, now King's, swan marker, dressed in a scarlet uniform, leads this peculiar parade. When swans are spotted with cygnets, the boats surround the swan family, and the birds are carefully lifted from the water, weighed, checked for injuries, and ringed with identification numbers before being released. Originally, swan-upping was about marking which swans belong to the crown, with one nick in the beak, versus those claimed by the Vintners and Dyers livery companies, with 2 nicks, the only organizations historically allowed to own swans alongside the monarch. Today, it's primarily a conservation exercise to monitor swan populations, but the pageantry and legal ownership remain firmly in place. What makes this tradition particularly strange is its formality. and the serious legal framework supporting it. The position of royal swan marker is an official appointment, and interfering with the king's swans remains technically illegal under the 1981 We Will and Countryside Act. The current swan marker, David Barber, was appointed by Queen Elizabeth in 1993 and wears a traditional scarlet coat with a swan feather in his cap while performing his duties. In modern times, the swan-upping ceremony has evolved to include educational components, with local school children invited to learn about swan biology and conservation. Yet it remains fundamentally a reminder of royal ownership of wild animals, a concept that seems strange to modern sensibilities but continues as an unusual link to medieval royal privileges. Number 5. The Royal Piper and Morning Alarm. How would you feel about being woken by bagpipes outside your bedroom window every morning at 9 a.m.? For the monarch, it's just another day. Since the reign of Queen Victoria in 1843, the British monarch has employed a personal bagpiper to play under their window every weekday morning for 15 minutes. This peculiar alarm clock tradition began when Victoria and Prince Albert visited Scotland and were charmed by the Highland bagpipes played at the home of the Marquess of Breadalbane. Victoria decided she wanted to wake up to bagpipes every morning, and thus the position of royal piper was created. This isn't just an occasional performance. It's a serious military position. The royal piper is usually a pipe major from a Scottish or Irish regiment who lives at the royal residence. Queen Elizabeth II maintained this tradition throughout her 70-year reign, with her piper playing at 9 a.m. sharp, whether she was at Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, Balmoral, or Holyrood House. The only residence where the piper doesn't perform this duty is Sandringham, due to the layout of the house. What makes this tradition particularly bizarre is its persistence, despite changing times and technologies. In an age of gentle alarm apps and smart home systems that can wake you with your favorite music, the monarch still chooses to be roused by the distinctly loud and penetrating sound of bagpipes. The position is so important that when the piper is on vacation, a replacement must be found. The monarch cannot go without their traditional morning bagpipes. The role has expanded beyond morning wake-up calls. The royal piper also plays at state banquets, walking around the table after the loyal toast. They perform at the monarch's private dinner parties and official functions. Pipe Major Paul Burns, the Queen's last piper, also had the honor of playing at her funeral in 2022, performing Sleep, Dearie Sleep, as her coffin was lowered into the royal vault at St. George's Chapel. King Charles III has continued the tradition, keeping the position of royal piper active. The current piper, Pipe Major Scott Methven, has described the role as the pinnacle of any piper's career. It remains one of the more audible reminders that royal daily life includes elements that would seem utterly foreign to most people, including a live bagpipe performance before breakfast every morning. Number 4. Black-edged stationery and morning rituals. Would you spend an entire year wearing only black if a family member died? For royals, elaborate mourning is non-negotiable. The royal family's mourning traditions are extraordinarily detailed and prolonged, compared to modern civilian practices. When a significant royal dies, a complex system of mourning periods begins, with specific rules about clothing, social engagements, and even stationery. Perhaps the most visible aspect is the strict adherence to all black clothing which senior royals must keep packed in their luggage whenever they travel, just in case a death occurs while they're away from home. One of the strangest elements of royal mourning is the use of black-edged stationery. Following a royal death, all correspondence from the royal household is sent on paper with a black border, with the width of the border indicating the proximity of relationship to the deceased. This tradition dates back to the Victorian era, when Queen Victoria set the standard for elaborate mourning after Prince Albert's death. Victoria herself used black-edged paper for decades after Albert died in 1861. The royal mourning periods are strictly regimented. The official royal mourning period usually lasts 1 to 2 weeks for the public, but can extend much longer for family members. When Queen Elizabeth II died, the royal family observed a 7-day period of official mourning after the funeral, but then entered a private mourning period of up to 1 year, during which their public appearances and clothing choices continued to reflect their grieving status. What makes these traditions particularly unusual is their formality in an age when most people have adopted more personal and less ritualized approaches to grief. The royal family still changes the buckles and buttons on their outfits to black versions during mourning, removes or covers bright decorations in their homes, and follows strict protocols about which events they can attend during various stages of the mourning period. These elaborate mourning customs aren't just personal choices. They're considered duties. When Princess Diana died in 1997, Queen Elizabeth II faced criticism for remaining at Balmoral Castle and not immediately returning to London to display her grief more publicly. This tension between private feelings and public mourning duties illustrates how these traditions can sometimes clash with modern expectations, yet they remain fundamental to royal identity and protocol. Number 3. Christmas presents on Christmas Eve. When do you open your Christmas presents? If you're royal, the answer might surprise you. The British royal family doesn't open Christmas presents on Christmas morning, like most people. Instead, following German tradition, a nod to their German ancestry through Prince Albert, they exchange gifts on Christmas Eve. This happens after afternoon tea, when the family gathers around a table in the white drawing room at Sandringham, where presents are laid out by household staff, according to a strict seating plan organized by Prince Philip until his death. The gift-giving isn't just scheduled differently. It's an entirely different concept. Royal family members don't exchange expensive or serious gifts. Instead, there's an unwritten rule that presents should be cheap and humorous. And Meghan apparently once gave the Queen a singing hamster toy, which the monarch found hilarious. What makes this tradition particularly unusual is the contrast between the formal setting and the silly gifts. Imagine the most senior royals, dressed in semi-formal attire in a grand drawing room, decorated with priceless antiques, earnestly unwrapping gag gifts and novelty items. Former royal butler, Paul Burrell, has described the scene as surprisingly ordinary, despite the extraordinary surroundings. They are just like any other family, who all have a laugh and a joke. The actual Christmas day is reserved for religious observance. The family attends church service at St. Mary Magdalene Church, walking there publicly while locals and photographers gather to see them. Their Christmas lunch is a relatively formal affair, featuring turkey and all the trimmings, followed by the monarch's Christmas broadcast to the nation. The contrast between the private humor of Christmas Eve and the public formality of Christmas Day reflects the dual nature of royal life. Private individuals living very public lives governed by tradition. This gift-giving custom is strictly enforced, and newcomers to the family are carefully briefed on what type of present is appropriate. When Diana first joined the family, she reportedly made the mistake of buying expensive cashmere sweaters and mohair scarves for everyone, only to learn that joke gifts were the expected currency of royal Christmas. Number 2. The hostage MP at the state opening of Parliament. Did you know a member of Parliament is held hostage at Buckingham Palace whenever the monarch visits Westminster? This isn't historical fiction. It happens every year. Perhaps one of the strangest royal traditions is the taking of a parliamentary hostage during the state opening of Parliament. Before the monarch travels to Westminster to deliver the Queen's, now King's, speech, a member of Parliament is ceremonially held at Buckingham Palace as a hostage to guarantee the monarch's safe return. This peculiar custom dates back to the 17th century, when relations between the Crown and Parliament were particularly tense following the English Civil War and the execution of Charles I. The hostage MP, usually the Vice-Chamberlain of the household who was always a government whip, remains at the palace until the monarch returns safely. The MP is treated well during their captivity, typically enjoying refreshments and watching the ceremony on television. But the symbolic significance of being a hostage remains. In recent ceremonies, Mix have described the experience as surreal, sitting in a palace room with royal staff members while technically being held as security against harm to the sovereign. What makes this tradition particularly bizarre is that it continues in the modern era when relations between Parliament and the monarchy are stable. Former MP Jim Fitzpatrick, who served as the hostage in 2014, described the experience. "I was told that if anything happened to Her Majesty, if she was held hostage or harmed in any way, what would happen to me would be best not to contemplate." Though said with a smile, the underlying historical tension between Crown and Parliament is preserved in this ceremonial hostage-taking. The tradition is part of the elaborate security measures surrounding the state opening. Another related custom is the ceremonial search of the cellars beneath the Houses of Parliament before the monarch's arrival, a direct reference to the 1605 gunpowder plot when Guy Fawkes attempted to blow up King James I. The yeomen of the guard, in their Tudor uniforms, still perform this search with lanterns before each state opening, looking for modern-day plotters over 400 years after the original threat. These traditions might seem like theatrical relics, but they serve as powerful historical reminders of a time when the relationship between monarch and Parliament was literally a matter of life and death. The fact that a democratically elected MP is still symbolically held hostage by the Crown during an important constitutional ceremony demonstrates how deeply historical tensions are woven into Britain's political fabric. Number 1. Royal birth announcements via easel. In the age of social media and instant news, would you believe the royal family still announces births using a physical notice on an easel? The tradition continues today. Perhaps the most visibly anachronistic royal tradition in our high-tech age is the royal birth announcement ritual. When a royal baby is born, particularly one in direct line to the throne, the news is formally announced by placing a framed notice on a ceremonial easel outside Buckingham Palace. This wooden easel stands in the forecourt of the palace, where crowds gather to see the official announcement, which includes the baby's gender, time of birth, and a statement that mother and child are doing well, all printed on formal palace letterhead and signed by the medical team. This tradition dates back hundreds of years, but gained particular prominence during Queen Victoria's reign. What makes it especially unusual in modern times is that it continues alongside digital announcements. When Prince George was born in 2013, the traditional easel announcement occurred minutes after the news had already spread worldwide via the royal family's social media accounts and news websites, yet the palace still meticulously followed protocol, with the Queen's press secretary carrying the notice from the hospital to the palace in a car with police escort, maintaining the formality of centuries past. The birth announcement easel represents just one part of a complex set of royal birth traditions. Before modern times, Home Secretaries were required to witness royal births to verify the legitimacy of heirs. While this invasive practice ended in 1948, other traditions continue. Royal births are marked by gun salutes, 41 guns in Green Park and 62 from the Tower of London, and the ringing of Westminster Abbey's bells for 3 hours. What's particularly fascinating about the easel tradition is how it creates a physical, tangible moment in an increasingly digital world. Despite the instantaneous nature of modern communication, people still gather outside Buckingham Palace to see the announcement in person, taking photographs of the easel to share on the very social media platforms that made the physical announcement technically redundant. It's a perfect example of how royal traditions create experiences that digital alternatives cannot fully replace. The tradition continues with each new generation. When Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis were born, the same easel was used, continuing a custom that bridges centuries of royal history. In an age when most birth announcements come via text message or social media post, the sight of palace officials ceremonially placing a framed notice on a wooden stand remains one of the most visible manifestations. Do you think these bizarre traditions will survive in an increasingly modern monarchy? Or will future generations of royals finally decide that some customs are too strange for the 21st century?